2013 you took up that job. Before you were at Amice. Some people in Germany call it EMAIS,
Yes.
which is the European Association is a European Association for mutuals. And before that, you had 15 years of experience in very many different fields of financial and political areas, including United Nations, New York, Venezuela, I heard you last night, Angola, I read here, so very international. So, Catherine, very much looking forward to your speech. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael, for this kind introduction. The other day, during one of these many telephone conversations I have with a colleague who sits in Beijing, between Beijing and Paris, as he is head of the China operations for the group VIV, which is the largest mutual group in health insurance in Paris. And of course, we were always discussing the same themes, mutual insurance, its roots, its raison d'être, its inevitable need to change. As we were discussing this, and later I got this invitation from Alex, that I warmly thank here, to expose, to present on the underpinning concept behind mutuality. I thought that maybe this exercise that I have started, which is to unearth the thread of mutuality across the globe, to find some answers to our questions. Well, maybe I could share this with you today, and maybe you will agree with me at the end that the model is worthy of some considerations, not only on the basis of what it has done in the past, proved useful in past situations, but also for its potential to meet future generations' needs. So let's start, and then you will tell me. So what you see on the right-hand side is what is called the Hammurabi Code, which is engraved on a stele made of basalt, very high, on 2 meters and 25 centimeters. And this Hammurabi Code was erected by King Hammurabi in Babylon in the 18th century BC. Babylon is nowadays Iraq. This stele was afterwards stolen or taken to nowadays Iran, to a city called Suze, as a war booty. So this is where it was discovered in 1901 by French archaeologists, and you may know this. France had a monopoly on all archaeological finds in the 19th century. So it ended in the Louvre, where it is to be seen today. So what this stele has engraved are 282 rules about that try to unify what King Hammurabi found as many different legal codes when he expanded his kingdom, which lasted for 4 decades. So he expanded his kingdom to reach almost the whole of Mesopotamia. So he decided to standardize all the existing codes, rules like an eye for an eye, which we all know, but also rules pertaining to contracts, litigation, but most importantly for us today, it is the earliest known legal code in human society and the first documented loss limitation method. There is a description that we won't be able to read today because it's in cuneiform language, but signs. But under this method, a merchant asking for a loan would pay an additional amount to have the guarantee from the loaner that the loan would be suppressed should the goods be lost or stolen. So this is what is known as the first loss limitation method. So moving a bit further in history, I mean later in history, in the 14th century, Genoa was then, of course, the seat of very, very wealthy merchants. But why was that? It was because Genoa was one of the main ports ruling all the shipping and trading routes in the Mediterranean. It is commonly known that marine insurance is one of the earliest forms of mutual insurance. So, in fact, in the archives of the city of Genoa, what was found was one of the first marine insurance contracts ever, especially since the contract found in Genoa was the first unbundled insurance contract, so not tied with any investment or any type of other guarantee. So this was particularly important for ship owners. Obviously, you understand why. This marine insurance contract was later formalized by Edward Lloyd in 1687 in his coffee house in London. We're staying in London and moving to 1666. I'm sure many of you must have heard about the Great Fire of London. Well, to put it into perspective, so on the 2nd of September 1666, in the early hours of Sunday morning, at Thomas Farriner's bakery shop on Pudding Lane, a fire broke out. The blaze really quickly expanded. You must remember that all the houses were built out of wood, and there were no fire brigades. So the flames expanded, and the fire lasted for 4 days, destroying 13,000 homes and 87 churches, including St. Paul's Cathedral. Amazingly, only 6 people died. But in terms of property loss, in today's money, in pounds, it is estimated that the loss was incurred amounted 1.5 billion pounds. So there's always something good coming out of something bad. So out of these ashes rose the first property insurance contract. So why is that? Well, in 1666, tenants were liable for anything happening to the homes they did not even own. The landlords didn't pay for the homes, even when they burned. So there were many litigations, and the situation was untenable. So a fire court was set up. And this fire court started dealing with these issues of who pays for what. So at a meeting at Tom's Coffee House, the hand-in-hand mutual insurance company was established, first known as Contributors for Insuring Houses, Chambers, Rooms for Loss by Fire by Amicable Contribution. So later, this company was acquired by the Commercial Union in 1905. So it made it through the ages. So if we cross the Atlantic, where houses were also built in wood in the 18th century, and still are actually, where their companies realized that it would probably be cheaper to extinguish the fires more effectively than pay for rebuilds of the houses. And so they started setting up fire brigades, and they put plaques on like the one you see on the right-hand side on the houses that were insured. So when the fire brigades came, they knew who they were basically working for, or who would repair the house and pay them. So these were the fire mark plates. So in 1735, the first mutual on American soil was set up. It was called the Friendly Society of Mutual Insuring of Homes Against Fire. And it was set up by the resident of Charleston, South Carolina. This company didn't last long. However, in 1752, at the instigation of Benjamin Franklin, another mutual insurance company, which exists to this day, was set up and called the Philadelphia Contribution for the Insurance of Houses from Loss by Fire, better known as Hand in Hand. So by 1780, several mutual insurances had been formed all along the East Coast. But maybe more of a seminal moment for the mutual insurance, even today in the US, was created by the Homestead Act in 1860. I'm not sure you've ever heard of it, but the Homestead Act, what did it do? It granted 75 hectares of land to all the farmers, all the migrants who were willing to conquer the West. And so these farmers, they were generally very, very much in contradiction with the wealthy financiers of the East Coast, like New York and so. And they certainly wouldn't want to pay or abide to the rules of these wealthy East Coast financiers. And so they decided to form their own insurance companies, and these were mutual insurance companies. And actually, in these by the 1920s, it is recorded that more than 2,000 mutual insurance companies were formed. So today, the companies that ICME federates, we have 280 in 75 countries, well, they constitute a wide array of legal forms. I'm not going to go through all of them, but Michael already mentioned the risk retention groups, very much present in Anglo-Saxon countries, but friendly societies in the UK, community-based organizations, etc., fraternal benefit societies, etc. But from only our members, I can say that the mutuals were formed by either teachers, shop owners, doctors, pharmacists, architects, civil engineers, taxi drivers, public transportation companies, trains, municipalities, universities, libraries, etc. So some household names which admittedly you won't know, because unless you live in the country of these mutuals, because they don't tend to be international. However, many of them now tend to merge or to form groups. Like the first one, Unive, was formed in 1794 in the Netherlands. It has undertaken to scan all the existing mutual and cooperative, etc., insurance companies in the world, more than 5,000 companies, and look for their premium income, asset, investment, number of employees, and number of policy holders. Interestingly, this has been done since 2007, so you will see there is a linear growth. On the basis of the 2015 figures, this is what we found. So a bit more than a quarter of the global insurance market is in the hands of mutual insurers, or let's say not-for-profit insurers. So what does it look like in the world? We see that you see Europe is very strong, obviously, but the first place is held by the US. As I said before, I mean there were lots of, especially in the Midwest, lots of mutual insurance. A lot of life insurers are still mutual in the US, but then there was a very strong growth in Latin America. And of course, much less in Africa, but Asia. If the mutual picks up in China, we expect, of course, a lot of changes in Asia. So, just as said before, you see the sector wrote an aggregate of $1.2 trillion in 2015. And you see where it started in 2007, and except for a few years when it went down, and sometimes also it's a matter of the exchange rate. You can see that the growth has been linear, and it maintains itself more or less at the same now, or around 26%. This is just a slide that compares the growth of the mutual market to the total market, and we base our figures on Swiss Re. Mutuals have always been stronger in non-life, at least in Europe. So that shows as well. As for the social impact the sector brings, you can see that not only does it employ a lot of people around the world, but also, of course, it serves almost a billion member policyholders across the world. The nice thing we observe now is the growth of the micro-insurance through mutual form in some countries like India, the Philippines, and Kenya, and Colombia. So it's nice to see that the spread of micro-insurance is also making a difference in these low-income countries. Talking about low-income countries, we also have found that scanning all these the laws of the countries, we realize that there is still a vacuum, a void of any mutual or enabling law for mutual or cooperative insurance in 45% of the world's countries. But paradoxically, or what can I say? I mean, very cynically, it's a shame that most of these countries are low income or medium income countries, where you think that you could assume that having a mutual insurance law would help bridge the protection gap. So let's see now what you think. Why mutuals? First of all, they are not run by the state, owned by the state. They are private legal entities, and they're run by private law. They are generally grouping of persons, not of capital, not of pooling of funds. They are collectively owned. In some countries they are not owned, but they are only supervised by the collective. This is an issue that differs according to the history of the mutual and the culture of the country. There is some control exerted through the members, a bit like shareholders when in a shareholding company. They have the main meeting is the general meeting, obviously. Any profit is either redistributed through money or given, through rebates in further policies. So this is really the test. Normally, a mutual should not have external shareholders. So as a CEO of a very large French group called Covea said, he said, our matière première is time. We are not under the same time pressure as PLC. As a PLC can be. Hence, independent from large financial groups. So, in a situation of uncertainty and unpredictability, and in a very complex global economic system, we cannot know which model will perform better in the end. So we state that no model is inherently better than others. That advantages, especially in the financial system, they accrue through diversity. A pluralistic model is valuable for Europe as it is for any part in the world. Yet we must admit that most rules are created for the oversight of the shareholder company, which is the standard form that everybody knows, everybody studies. When you go to economic school, business schools, you normally only study the PLC model. Only now is there a trend to also start looking at the more the social economy, or how do they call it today? Sorry, it will come back. So we currently are calling for caution against the destruction of any successful model, because as we mentioned today, I mean, there are lots of, it's an avalanche of legislation, regulation, etc. And proportionality is not yet applied, and we see that a lot of our members are SMEs and small and have to fight every day. So again, we remind regulators and supervisors that nurturing different business forms is not incompatible with their objectives of facilitating competition. Just citing a sentence from The Economist, which is a liberal newspaper, and says that just as an ecosystem benefits from diversity, so the world is better off with a multitude of corporate forms. So, you must have heard of Peter Bruegel the Elder. He was a famous member of the Flemish Primitive School. This painting is actually at the Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna. So you probably know it, Michael. What does it say? I mean, the Babel everybody knows, but what you may not know is that it comes from the Hebrew language, and it means to confuse. So confusion is one thing. It's also used to describe the beginning of the multiplicity of tongues, the beginning of civilization. So diversity, and so I would like to say that let's embrace diversity, let's cherish diversity, let's be united in diversity, like what the EU motto is, United in Diversity. Thank you very much.